Have you ever wondered where the young get all their energy? Our energy comes from the foods that we eat. But when we don't eat, we have to rely on the energy that our body stores in our fat. To use our fat for energy, our body uses a gene that has a complicated name, carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1A, or CPT1A for short. The job of this gene is to help change the fats in the food we eat into energy we need to work and play and live healthy lives. But for some Alaska Native people, this gene works a bit differently. These Alaska Native people have what is known as the Arctic variant of CPT1A, often just called the Arctic variant. In some very young children, having the Arctic variant can lead to low blood sugar when they are unable to eat or drink and need to rely on their fat for energy. This is most likely to happen when they are sick with fever, diarrhea and vomiting, or a bad cold that causes the baby to breathe hard. This video tells the story of the Arctic variant of CPT1A and how parents and caregivers can help maintain healthy blood sugar levels in babies and children living with the Arctic variant.
Since I was small, when my mom was cooking years ago, gardens at home, everything. We got a cellar, all kinds of plants, a lot of cabbage and celery, real good. So I know how since I was small, I've been doing this.
The Arctic variant is very common among people who live in the far northern coastal regions of the world: Siberia, Greenland, northern Canada, and Alaska. The traditional diet of the Alaska Native people and others from these coastal Arctic areas is unique, made up of mostly sea mammals and fish. Researchers think that the reason the Arctic variant is so common in this part of the world is that it helps people eating this unique diet stay healthy.
Every year, my kids and I, we go pick berries and different greens, go fishing. We help my dad hunt for seals. I want them to be able to learn so that they can teach their kids as my grandparents taught me. So I'm Kim Gray. I work at the camp department. I just like to see people making that connection of, it doesn't have to be hard to live a healthy lifestyle.
In Alaska, every baby is tested for the Arctic variant of CPT1A as part of the newborn screening test. Screenings have shown that there are a lot of Alaska Native babies born with the Arctic variant, almost 800 every year. Most of the babies are healthy and never have any problems. But just like all babies, those who have the Arctic variant sometimes have trouble eating and drinking if they aren't feeling well, like when they are sick with fever, diarrhea and vomiting, or a bad cold that causes them to breathe hard. When this happens, all babies can get low blood sugar if they go too long without eating, and they can become jittery, hard to wake up for feeding, or even have seizures. These same problems also happen in sick babies who have the Arctic variant, but may happen a little sooner. Experts recommend that babies with the Arctic variant under 2 years old don't go more than 6 to 8 hours without eating or drinking when they are sick. Babies are tested for the Arctic variant as newborns, so parents and caregivers will know if they may be at increased risk in going 6 to 8 hours without eating or drinking.
Good boy, good job. Thank you, LJ.
However, any sick baby that becomes jittery or too sleepy to feed should be seen by a healthcare provider quickly, even if they don't have the Arctic variant. Fortunately, most babies with the Arctic variant never have any problems, even when they are sick. Parents in Alaska often have questions about the Arctic variant. Doctors Kohler and Hirschfeld work together in providing CPT-1A care. Here they discuss some frequently asked questions from their experiences with Alaskan parents.
So Dave, I've been talking to parents and I've been talking to other providers in Alaska for a while about CPT-1, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page as what you're telling people from the metabolic genetics standpoint, and seeing what you tell providers and parents when they ask questions about what does CPT-1 mean for my baby.
So the Arctic variant slows down how fast we burn fats. And the only time that really is important is if we're not eating. Like when kids get sick and they're throwing up or they have a fever and they have to depend on burning their own body energy stores, their body fat, as the only source of energy they have, then the Arctic variant can be a problem because it slows down how fast they can do that. But if you're eating normally, because our diet has fat in it, but it also has carbohydrates and protein, so we get that mixture of sources of energy.
Right.
As long as you're eating normally and getting those different fuels, the Arctic variant doesn't have any effect on our ability to generate energy.
How long should babies go without eating if they are sick and they have this CPT-1 Arctic variant?
For infants 3 to 6 months of age, they probably normally are going to eat every 6 to 8 hours. And as long as they're following their normal schedule, they're not going to have any troubles. It's when their babies are going longer than they typically do. But on the other hand, if their child just seems very sleepy, isn't waking up, just doesn't want to eat at all, really any duration of time might be time for concern, and they might want to call their health provider to get some advice on what they can do.
And my favorite question that I get from parents is, if you can't burn fats for energy, why is my baby not really fat?
Well, good question. But as I said, the Arctic variant slows how fast we can burn fats. So that only really matters if fat is your only source of fuel. And the only time that really happens is when you're sick and not eating.
Right.
So normally we're getting all sorts of different sources of fuel. And so we have no problem burning that amount of fat that we get in our regular diet. And so therefore these kids don't get fat and they're not have any other problems. They don't need any special diets or anything else.
Oh, that's great. And babies don't need to eat more often either, right? They just eat at the regular speed that all other babies eat at, the regular volumes and all.
They eat just like any other kid.
Great.
And they also, just like any other kid, they are able to know when they're hungry.
Oh, right.
We don't need to remind them to eat all the time. They can sense hunger and eat normally. It's just really when they're sick or something else is going on, like a surgery, when they don't have access to food or they can't eat, that they can get into trouble.
That's great. It sounds like we're saying pretty much exactly the same thing. So glad we're on the same page. And yeah, thanks for talking about it a little bit.
Yeah.
An important thing to remember is that having the Arctic variant of CPT-1A is not a disease. Almost all babies or young children who have the Arctic variant are nearly always perfectly healthy. And as they grow older, the risk of getting these symptoms will decrease. As with all babies, there are some very important things parents should know and do. The key is to recognize when your baby is sick enough that he or she can't feed. This usually happens when your baby has a high fever, vomiting and diarrhea, or a bad cold that is causing your baby to breathe hard. If these happen and your baby can't eat or drink for 6 to 8 hours, you should take your baby to your healthcare provider to be checked. Also, if your baby gets jittery, or is too sleepy to wake up to feed, or your baby has a seizure, you need to take your baby to see your healthcare provider right away. At times like these, your baby might need an IV to get some fluids, especially if your child hasn't been able to eat for many hours. It's also important to remember that if your child needs any type of surgery or dental work, Tell your doctor or dentist that your child has the Arctic variant of CPT1A and should not go without feeding for more than 6 to 8 hours. Finally, parents should know that the Arctic variant is very common among Alaska Native people and other people from the far north. Researchers think the reason for this is that having the Arctic variant and eating their traditional diet may help keep people of the far north healthy. Now you know all about living with the Arctic variant of CPT1A. More importantly, you know how to recognize when your baby is sick enough to see a healthcare provider. Remembering this information can help every baby, including those living with the Arctic variant of CPT1A, to grow and lead healthy, happy lives.